Hi, I'm Mikey and welcome to a tour of the AP Art portfolio that scored me a 5. I'm so excited to share all of the stories and processes behind these pieces. I definitely took some awkward references for this portfolio, but I think it all paid off in the end. The AP Art courses are different than some of the other AP classes, so first I'm going to start with some structural context. If you already understand how AP Art works or you just don't care, I'll put timestamps on screen and in the comments, and then you can skip to the start of my actual portfolio. It's easiest to begin with the end, the slightly intimidating portfolio submission. In this video, I'll show all of my images and the written components that I submitted. Firstly, there are 5 selected works, which are the 5 strongest technically and conceptually pieces in a portfolio. These pieces can be of any theme, which is not the case for the other segment. For me personally, I chose 3 pieces from my sustained investigation, which I'll talk about later, and 2 pieces that I created the summer before my senior year. The bulk of the submission revolves around a sustained investigation, or SI. In the SI, you have 15 slides where most of the slides will just be a piece of artwork, but they can also be progress or process slides. So that doesn't mean 15 pieces for 15 slides. You can have less than 15 pieces and still meet the requirements. The SI is all coherently linked together by one theme. Like Jeopardy, the central SI focus is in the form of a question. And mine was, how can I explore my emotional and physical relationships with water, and how do they intersect? And that SI question leads into one of the 2 long written pieces, which I'll read now. The prompt says, identify the inquiry that guided your sustained investigation. My response was, how can I explore my emotional and physical relationships with water, and how do they intersect? Inspired by a competitive swim, nostalgic memories, and the interaction of perception and sentiment, I studied various tangents of my complex relationship with water. I also investigated my connotations of water: freeing, suffocating, omnipresent. In some pieces, I synthesized multiple of my inspirations. While some explore tangible subjects, others are euphoric or surreal. Ultimately, water is the backbone of my lived experiences. And within that description, whenever I'm referencing specific pieces, following that reference, I would put numbers in parentheses, which is a good strategy to show directly how your written component is tied into your actual pieces. The second prompt says, describe ways your sustained investigation developed through practice, experimentation, and revision. And I wrote, for 4 works, I captured underwater photos with my phone in a clear bag in a pool to study how the human figure interacts with water. I explored how mediums capture water's texture differently: oil paints, color pencils, and oil pastels. For complex pieces, I practiced with sketches to establish colors and forms. I also experimented with additive materials like paper clay and string, and base materials like cardboard and aluminum foil to enhance concepts. My main revisions clarified meaning, sometimes incorporating text. And same as the first one, I include in parentheses the numbers of the specific slides that I'm referencing. Now let's dive into my portfolio, no pun intended. Slide 1 is a piece titled Aquatic Figures. I love this piece. A common strategy for when you're figuring out the order for your portfolio is to start and end with strong pieces, and I would definitely say that this is one of my strongest. This is actually the first piece that I created for my AP Art portfolio, and right off the bat, this is a really good example of taking awkward reference photos. So I actually had a little underwater photo shoot, which provided references for 4 of the pieces in my portfolio, as I referenced earlier. I basically put my phone in a plastic bag and recorded these videos of me like swimming around in the water, and I also took some photos, and then I took screenshots of the videos, and 3 of the still frames from one of the videos ended up becoming this painting. And I really like the different colors and how I captured the light and shadow. I was really interested in the way that light and color look differently when the human figure is underwater, and I loved pulling out the aquas and the oranges and the deep umbers and the bright whites, and the images from this underwater photo shoot underpinned my portfolio and investigation. This painting is a pretty large triptych. It is 20 by 32 inches when you include the spaces, and because this piece is so central to my investigation and I thought it was strong technically and conceptually, I also chose it as my first selected work. In the selected work section, you get an extra 100-character written piece where you can write about the ideas of the piece. And for that section, I wrote, "Swimming intuitively feels pure and free, soaring through currents of light and color." I think this piece introduces my investigation well. It was pretty ambitious compared to some of my other works. Now let's move on to slide 2, atmospheric nostalgias. So the order of my portfolio after the first slide, of course, is loosely chronological. So you'll see this grouping of childhood photos exploring how water interacted with these memories from my childhood. This piece is done in oil pastels. I included atmospheric in the title because I really think this piece does a good job of enhancing the atmosphere of the original photo. The whites of the clouds and the blues of the water. And I used this, it was like a wooden ceramic tool with a metal end that curved, and I used it to scrape on bits of oil pastel in sort of an impasto technique, which I think really added to the texture of the piece and build up a lot of the shapes of the clouds and the waves. A technique that I used in my portfolio was to use the materials written section to explain why I chose something. So I chose the oil pastels to emphasize the atmosphere. Instead of just writing oil pastels on paper or something, I wrote oil pastels for atmosphere, sort of explaining why I use them, not just, oh, I use this just for fun. I also like the process written bit, so I'll read that now. Blending colors in the murky vibrancy of memory, exploring how water connects me and my brother. And I felt that these written pieces set up the association between water and nostalgia for me and how my brother is caught up in some of these memories. Slide 3 continues the investigation of water in my childhood. Side note, I didn't know this before I took AP Art, but there's not actually a spot for you to put in the title. And this piece is called Dreaming with the Fishes, which I thought was very clever. It's a play on the idiom sleeping with the fishes, which means you're dead. And I remember writing on a rubric that while sleeping with the fishes is an idiom for death, dreaming with the fishes is a vision of life. And I was like, wow, it felt really poetic. And I was sad that I couldn't include it in my portfolio. For this actual piece, I've referenced a baby picture, but I definitely took some creative liberties to transcend beyond just realism. One of the ways that I did that is I emphasized this bubbly pattern, which you can see in the figure and the water, and of course the fish shapes that seem to be swimming out of the water. They kind of defy physics a little bit. A lot of my work captures a feeling more than relying solely on reality. This slide is compiled in Procreate, so then on the left you can see the clear image of the print. This is printmaking, I don't think I said that before. So I carved a block and then I could print that image multiple times. And then on the right, there are prints done on acrylic glazed aluminum foil. Throughout my portfolio, I tried to explore a lot of materials and surfaces, which I think I mentioned that in one of the written bits. I like the way that the print on the white background looks. I think the shininess of the aluminum foil captures the ephemeral feeling I was looking for, but the bottom two prints look terrifying. Let's just say that some things are not meant to be negatives. Yeah. Now we move on to slide 4, which I have a lot to say about this one. When I was first creating this, I thought this was going to be one of the best pieces in my portfolio. It took me almost 2 months to complete this, although it was a lot of prep work in the beginning. So I had this wonderful idea in theory where I would collect physical tiles from a pool and then incorporate them into a work. I went through the very awkward process of, during a couple swim practices, I would literally, I don't think I mentioned this, but I competitively swam in high school, and that was I was on the swim team, and that is a big inspiration for this portfolio. Anyways, so during a couple of practices, I just dove down and picked up tiles from the bottom of the pool. It was 12 feet or something. It was kind of crazy. But basically, because one of the walls was crumbling, I could source these tiles, which was a little bit awkward because it's just I'm getting out of the pool, let me grab my tiles and try to it's not I could put them in my pocket. It's just kind of awkward. I had to hide them behind my water bottle because how am I going to explain, oh yeah, I'm just getting these art tiles for an art project. Wonderful. Okay. Once I got them home, it's a grout on them that I had to get off. So I did some research and I soaked them in some vinegar because it's acidic and it would help break down some of the grout. And then I chopped off the grout it was kind of in between pliers and scissors, something that I found in my dad's workroom, to get off the grout. Then I was at a crossroads because I had 2 ideas and I ended up going with the one that I think was the worst one. The original concept is that I would make a frame using the tiles and then recreate a childhood photo and put it in the frame. And basically, long story short, I was really not happy with the drawing in the frame, which is very sad because it was a lot of work to make the frame. I used some leftover mixture from a piece that you'll see in a little bit of paper clay, shaving cream, and glue, and then I added baking soda to create a grout texture. So I fully made this tile frame with the 14 tiles that I had collected. Then the picture on the inside was very small, so I didn't have a lot of room to work with, which I think is why I ended up not liking the final result. But because it took me so long, I knew that I had to include it in my portfolio somehow. So I wrote a lot on the slide explaining what I did, so it read as more of a process slide. And in one of the written components, I wrote, exploring a tangent in my investigation where materials influence a concept more than an aesthetic appeal. Basically saying it's ugly, but it means a lot. Because the whole idea of the tiles is that he was talking about how artificial textures are tied to specific memories that I have. Whenever I see pool tiles or feel them, tactile feeling feels nostalgic. And then since I made this slide in Procreate, I mentioned that in the digital tools section. So for all of these that look like they're photoshopped or whatever, I just explained in the digital tools section that I used Procreate to put them together. Slide 5 is where I begin to get into some competitive swimming pieces. So I like this piece. I think it's a solid part of my investigation because it kind of leads into the swim team aspect of my portfolio. We had an assignment to use cardboard and to practice surface manipulation. Sometimes whenever I was swimming, I would feel dizzy or disoriented, hence the title. And so I decided to portray this using a glitching motif. So I used an X-Acto knife to cut out segments and then peel them off. And then I would shift parts of the composition to create a glitching effect, which I think was pretty effective, which is why I like this piece. And I like the contrast between the oranges and the blues. Yeah, that's about it. I don't have a lot to say about this piece, but I think it's pretty good. Slide 6 is of a piece called Futile Cleansing. This piece really means a lot to me. I know it doesn't look like a lot, but it represents a lot for me. Really, since the beginning, I have always had issues with goggles, and one of my biggest fears is being blind. So there's a phenomenon in swimming where whenever you dive in and you lose your goggles, you're kind of expected to swim through it, which is awful and my nightmare. It has happened a couple times, and I was really struggling to find goggles that fit well, and that I didn't have to worry about falling off. This was an issue for probably when I was 11 up to about 16, which is half of my high school career and before that. It got to a point where I was trying all these different pairs of goggles, and to try to make them last, I was washing them after every practice and race. And this piece feels like a representation of that obsession, the obsessive worry that I would be blind and there was nothing that I could do to control it, and it created a lot of anxiety for me. Anyways, so I created this piece of me washing my goggles to represent all of that. I enjoyed this process a lot. It's an 8x10. I started by making an 8x10 drawing of me, rinsing my goggles. And then I got probably around 7 or 8 sheets of 8x10 paper, a mix of construction paper and cardstock to get the colors that I wanted. I used an X-Acto knife and cut out the shapes. I used tracing paper or transfer paper. I don't actually remember. I'm gonna be so honest. No, I used transfer paper. I remember now. To transfer the bits of each color onto each of those sheets, and then I cut them out and I pasted it all onto one sheet. So it's decently thick when you carry it, but I really like the fact that it's just made with paper and glue, and then I glazed a little bit of acrylics on top to fix some of the colors. So this is just more surface manipulation, which is one of the focuses of the drawing exam. I remember I wrote that I added the lines to add tension, when really I just thought the composition looked a bit empty. So, things that you do that aren't that deep can be rewritten to sound more serious and intentional. I did a lot of that during this portfolio, I'll just say that. Slide 7 is a painting called Residue. This is one of my favorites as well. Spoiler alert, I also included this as a selected work. I think this is the second one of 5. It's based on how chlorine permeates every aspect of the body, the skin, the hair, and the lungs in this piece, as you can see. This was an awkward reference to take for sure, and when drawing this, it was like a picture of the bottom of my chin down to my torso. I did the portrait in grayscale because I wanted the skin to look withered, which I explained in the written bit. I added an acrylic wash of red, which somehow made the skin look even more sickly because it really contrasted with the greens and blues of the background and the lungs in a way that looked unnatural. I like how the water looks treacherous, kind of like a cubic painting. I think the fumes in the back, like the little swirly textures, look really good. I'm happy about how that came out. It looks like a layer of chlorine is sitting on top of the water, which is really how it feels, being in a chlorinated pool for a long time. The lungs seem to glow because of the bright yellow-green color. The final part of my process for this piece was doing some embroidery, which is pretty fancy for what I did. I really just did a couple of stitches with yarn that I dyed to be, I think some are yellow-green and some are just white, to kind of tie together like the fumes and the lungs and the water, and practice some more surface manipulation. Slides 8 and 9 are for the piece Rinse the Lather. I also think this is a strong piece, and I would have selected this as a selected work, but my art teacher said that since I'm already using 2 slides for it in my portfolio, that it's probably not, it wouldn't make sense to have a 3rd slide, which I agree with. I think she had a good point. And this piece captures the memories I have of shaving my legs before a big meet, like counties or districts or states or whatever. I wanted it to feel very intimate without being weird. This was a weird reference photo, and I just had it up on my computer and was like, yeah, this is what I'm drawing. This is the piece that I mentioned earlier where I created the mixture of glue, paper clay, and shaving cream to create the shaving cream texture, which I then glazed with aqua acrylic paint. I think the shaving cream looks really good, and I like the oranges in the skin against the purples that I pulled out of the background. I also like the details of the razor sitting on the little shelf, and I know that the bottles in the back are my swimming shampoo and conditioner that have a very distinctive aqua color. And then slide 9, the process piece, I took a small piece of cardboard and experimented with a couple of different mixtures and then wrote notes on it, which is a good technique. If you need to write more about a piece, then you can include it on a process slide. I forgot I did this until I was looking at this again, but I included the reference and a process photo, and you can see in comparison to the reference photo the amount of purples that I pulled out, because I thought that it looked kind of dead, and I wanted it to feel meditative, I think is the word I would use. Slide 10 is a piece called Bioluminescence. I know what you're thinking. This is a childhood photo, but it's more about how I perceive memories, which is why I included it later. 1, to avoid repetition in the beginning, and 2, it feels cohesive because it's kind of tying the portfolio back to the beginning. In this piece, I'm exploring how memories feel through a surrealist lens. This is one of the pieces where I used copyright-free reference image for the jellyfish to alter a childhood photo, and the background feels like a liminal space, but while it's liminal, it still feels natural in a sense, I think because of the water. I made it nighttime because I feel more creative at night and my brain is more active. And then I also used modeling paste to emphasize the vignetted shapes, although I'm not sure how effective that was, but it was something else to write. Slide 11 is a piece titled Window/Mirror. I think this piece looks really cool. It started with a concept of how water is both transparent and reflective. And so, using that framework, I imposed the idea of... I can't believe that fell. Sorry, the painting I hung up fell because I was trying to make the space look a bit less barren. But, it's okay. We continue. Using this framework, I kind of imposed on it that reflection mirrors reality, whereas the transparency is a window into a fantasy. the reflection is what's really happening, which is me peering into the water, whereas the window is into how I'm feeling, which is like when I look at water, I feel basically just like whimsical. It's not that deep, but I think I explained it well in the written pieces. When I overlaid the two images, I thought that it looked very cool. It was a pain in the butt to make, especially in the background, because I used one of those colorless colored pencil blenders, which makes a horrible noise and it takes forever. It was very annoying, but I really like all the layers of transparency, how you can see each layer, like you can see me peering in and you can see me swimming freely, and then the ripple pattern over top kind of unifies it and makes it feel more like water. I used a couple different pencils, and I actually used the mechanical pencil to do all of the stippling, which created an effect that I liked a lot. And I like what I wrote in the processes written section, where I said, layering graphite types in translucent layers, contrasting physical reality with emotional mirage. Like, that sounds so good. Are you kidding me? I just think this piece looks very cool in general. Slide 12 is a drawing called Reaching, which I added this in pretty last minute because I always liked the drawing, even though it was pretty conceptually absent. I think the written piece still sounds okay, which I'll read in a bit. And this was another piece where I drew one of the images from that underwater photo shoot. I really enjoyed the swirls of light and color, which is a common thread across my portfolio, I will say. But it's using a different medium to explore that. Yeah, and for a piece that means little to me personally, the material section says, I reach towards the viewer, clawing. In the tumult, the figure is abstracted into eddies of color. I think that sounds pretty good, even though the piece lacks a lot of substance, let's say. Slide 13 is a piece called Oceanic Abstractions. I'm very sad that this piece didn't photograph well. It looks a lot better in person, but every time that I tried to take a photo of it, it looked really washed out and didn't capture the depth of the painting. Also, real ones know that this had a secret fifth panel, but it looked really bad, so I turned it into a 4-panel piece. Again, these are selected compositions from underwater photos. I think this one really emphasized the light and shadow piece rather than color. I love the patterns that light makes in the skin, and this was the exploration of that. I also did a base of modeling paste, so when you see these in person, it's like there's like ripples on the panels that look very cool. I thought they were too important to leave out, even though the photo is just not good quality. It just looks overexposed, but that's okay. Not all photos can be winners. Slides 14 and 15 are the pieces that explore kind of like the emotional journey of when competitive swimming exited my life, and slide 15 especially. I'll get there. Slide 14 is not too bad. Slide 14 is a painting called Metamorphosis. I like to use animals as symbols in my work. I was doing some research on different aquatic animals, and I learned that dragonflies, after spending like their childhood in the water, they undergo a metamorphosis and they leave the water and they can never live there in the same way. I felt that really paralleled how my relationship with water will never be the same, especially after leaving competitive swimming. Like, it altered me in a way that I can't get back, and that's okay. But yeah, so the piece shows a hand releasing a dragonfly, which I referenced a copyright-free image again and linked that in the citations. Yeah, the background of this piece started as a chalk pastel drawing, and I liked the colors and the placement of the shapes and colors. but I didn't like the texture, so I redid it in gouache, and then I did the hand and the dragonfly in acrylics. And after the piece was done, I thought that it felt kind of empty, so I decided to add a caption that looked like one of those scientific annotations, which I really liked, and it explained my concept a bit more. What did it actually say? Oh yeah, the caption just says, Figure 1, once dragonflies metamorphose, they leave the water. Pretty simple, but I think it gets my point across. Also, I did not know that metamorphose was like the right form of that verb, but apparently it is. I thought it was metamorphosize. I actually don't know what it would be otherwise. And for the processes, I wrote, creating surreal scene that mirrors transition from an aquatic childhood to terrestrial maturation, which I think sounds pretty good. Now we're going to move on to the final piece in my sustained investigation, which is titled A Communal Release. This piece started with, it was a couple days before my last swimming ever. I think I was leaving for States the next morning, and I decided to get a haircut, and I wanted to buzz my head. So my hair, it's back now, but it was cut down to the shortest it had been since I was probably 10, which it felt so freeing. I don't even know how to describe it, but it felt so right for the time, and it felt like I was kind of cutting off my relationship with swimming. Before I left, I took this really dramatic picture of me like behind a shower door, and I sprayed water on the shower door to make it look like it was raining, and then I created a painting of it, and I really emphasized blues at the bottom transitioning into yellows at the top. When I look at the painting, actually it feels very hopeful to me, and I think that the figure looks grounded, although a lot of people have told me that they think that it's kind of depressing, but which is okay, because like people are allowed to interpret art in different ways. So first it started as just the painting, and then after I had swam at finals of my last swimming ever, so it was like the last time I was ever swimming in a competitive setting. It was me and my swim coach and one other girl, and we went out to a Chipotle, and as we were leaving, it started pouring. It was like a 15-minute drench, and it just stopped, and it felt like a purge. It felt very poetic considering what was happening. And so I was brainstorming kind of like a short little poem to commemorate that experience, which I eventually turned into the two adjoining panels, like on the top and on the bottom. What do they say? Let me check. The panels say, how apt that it rained after my final swim, a communal release. And that's how I came up with the title for this piece. Although I was really, for the longest time, I was trying to frame this piece as representing catharsis, like a final release of emotions and release. But I couldn't get it to fit into the poem, so I didn't make it the title because it didn't feel right. But yeah, making this painting just felt like a huge relief, and it felt like it culminated me leaving competitive swimming, and also it honored my connection to rain. I really appreciate it. I tried to explore rain earlier in my investigation, which it didn't really work out the way I wanted it to. I have so many like positive memories of being outside in the rain, which might sound weird, but like I love the rain. I feel very connected and in the moment whenever it's raining. So, and I think this piece found a way to honor that in a sense. Oh yeah, I didn't say this, but the two panels, like with the writing, I made them, so I used not in the way you're supposed to. Like I literally used like 2 wood blocks and somehow stapled together some unstretched canvas, which basically just made them impossible to hang. So the final image is compiled on Procreate like some of my other ones, because I never actually got it to hang properly, which I was kind of sad about. And because this was such an important piece, technically and conceptually, this is my final selected work. I'll share the last two in a bit. For the idea section, I wrote, revisiting rain to conceptualize sun shower memories, competitive swimming's end, and catharsis. I feel like that really sums up how I feel about this piece and how it really closes out my portfolio well, or at least my sustained investigation. Okay, what did I forget? I think this piece was really about the tension between mourning and relief, and in the end, relief definitely won out for me, but this piece definitely helped me work through that. That concludes my sustained investigation, and then I'll briefly show the two other selected works, one of which is also water themed. Slide 3 of my selected works is titled The Grapple. I made this piece last summer for Scholastics. Kind of like how I mentioned that I like to use animals as symbols. This is a good example of that. I like how dramatic it feels, and I like how the gold accents connect the portrait, the grasp, and the bird. For me, birds represent freedom, so it was like this octopus has captured my freedom, and so I'm like wrestling with the octopus a little bit. It just felt fun, and I think it looks pretty good technically, and conceptually there's a strong idea. So that's why I picked it as a selected work. In the idea section, I wrote, the bird, representing freedom, can only be saved with intentional action. And I think that sums it up. I don't have a lot to say about it, I just think it looks cool, and it's a fun piece. Slide 4 of my selected works is one of my favorite paintings of all time, although it's not that popular between other people, but like, I don't know. I think it's a very strong piece. It's the second piece in a series of 2, which are both titled Sink into Full Bloom Until You Wither into the Sun, which is a mouthful, but it means a lot, so I'll unpack that a little bit. I love the colors and the movement of the brush strokes. This one is done in oils. It captures a feeling that I don't really know how to describe, which is why I really feel connected to it. For the ideas section, I wrote, if mortality, the sun, is inevitable, then I can reach my highest potential, full bloom, without fear. This is the only piece where I thought it was really important to include the title, so I included it in the materials section. And then in the processes section, I wrote, mix daubs of color for swirling effect to show the ephemeral nature of existential thought. And that is the last piece of my submission. I have some overall thoughts on my portfolio, and then I'll move on to advice if you're looking to take AP art in the future. Taking this class and making this video feels very full circle. I know I have been watching videos like this since I was in 8th grade, and one of the things I was so excited to come to high school for was to take AP art, which, very lucky for me, this was the first year that AP art ran as an actual class for a couple of years, and it was my art teacher's. It was her first time teaching it because there used to be a different teacher in the building taught it. I didn't actually pick my theme until last spring, even though I had been thinking about it for years. I'm very happy with the work that I made this year, especially considering that I made some of these pieces in less than 2 weeks, and there were a number of pieces that I cut just because the way that my class was structured was a lot, let's just say. So I made a lot of pieces that I didn't need, and in the beginning of the year we were doing sketchbooks where it was more focused on technique rather than concept, so those didn't fit into my sustained investigation. Now I'd like to move on to some advice for future AP art students. Firstly, and most importantly, pick your focus early and stick with it. Like, it will be so much easier and less stressful if you lock in what you want to focus on. Avoid vague and or overdone topics like nostalgia is a heavy hitter, and something like self-portraits, because you can incorporate broader or vague themes into your investigation without that being your focus. because like everyone can do a portrait, but making your investigation portraits, it's just like, what are you gonna say? You want to find something that you have a lot to say about, which I'll continue talking about. Actually, that's my second point, is to make your investigation personal. I think the easiest way to find what you want to focus on is to ask yourself somewhat specific questions until you land on one that makes you think, ooh, hold on, I have a lot to say about this, because you want it to be something that you need to explore. You won't just have like one sentence to say about it. It's nice if you can find something with nuance in it or different tangents to explore. Like for me personally, I explored like water in my childhood, or in like a swimming setting, or in aesthetic perspective. I think another thing to consider is that there are internal and external framings of investigation questions. So my example would be, let's say if you want to talk about how technology affects childhood or something, like an internal framing would be, how would the technology that we have now affect my childhood experiences? Like that's personal, it's affecting you, that's like internal. Or if you would word the question as, how does the rise of technology affect childhood or something? I guess like whenever your topic becomes less about you, it's harder to think of ideas. And I had a friend who focused on something a little bit more general, which she could have connected to herself. I don't know, like the pieces that she related to were her stronger pieces, but there were times where she focused on something broad and then wasn't happy with the idea. It becomes a lot more of a fun and rewarding experience when you make your investigation about you, not to sound narcissistic. It's true, art is personal. My third piece of advice would be to brainstorm as you go. My class was structured in kind of an insane way, with so much love, if my art teacher is watching this, but I'm probably gonna send it to her. But like at the beginning of the year, we were working at a pace of one project for every 3 weeks, and then by the end we were doing 2 projects in 2 weeks, which that's a big shift. And like it was a lot of pieces to get through, and so something that really helped me was anytime I had like I didn't have a lot of homework that day, I would just sit down and think about, okay, like what pieces do I want to make in the future? Even if I'm like actively working on 2 pieces and have my next 2 ideas in my mind, you can keep brainstorming, because some of the ideas are going to be better than others. And if you like pre-plan taking reference photos, if you need to do that, it is so much easier, because then you can just start working and creating, which makes the class a lot more fun. My fourth and last piece of advice is kind of obvious, but it's to talk to your teacher and your classmates a lot. Ask for advice, ask for feedback, ask for a suggestion. Like there were so many pieces that like transformed when my art teacher said, oh, like why don't you try this material? Or sometimes I would be explaining a concept and she'd be like, oh, you can use this. Like there was a piece that I ended up scrapping that I used vellum, which is like a clear sheet, and the piece like would not have been possible without it. Or like she gave me paper clay to try, and it ended up creating one of my favorite pieces. Talking to your classmates, you can, number one, you can help them out if you see what they're working on and they're struggling with a concept or how to go about doing something. You can give them advice, and in turn you can be inspired what they're creating. I got some really great feedback from classmates that helped me work through some difficult pieces, and of course I got really great feedback from my teacher. And I don't think like my portfolio would not have turned out the same if I didn't have those interactions, I guess, with the people in the classroom, which makes me very grateful that I didn't have to self-study this and that the class was able to run. If you are planning to self-study AP Art, I think it's totally possible, but I would say try to seek out feedback, because it will strengthen the work that you're making and feedback is often good. I think that's all I have to say. I would 10 out of 10 recommend taking AP Art, even though it was pretty time intensive, but it was worth it for me. Especially if you like art, like, you're gonna love it. It's gonna be fun. If you want to see more of my art, you can follow me on Instagram at MikeyFremskyArt, or you can subscribe here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching if you made it to this point, and have a great day. Bye-bye.